Well met, everyone. I am Rich the Lich, and today I'm going to be showing you a bit more of my new world. There it is, folks, on screen. First off, if you notice, I start turning perhaps a little tiefling-ish, getting a little red. I just threw down in the garage with a bit of a workout. I train in my garage. I live in Arizona. It's the end of July. You can put two and two together. I'm dying here, overheating a bit, but let's talk about the heat and the spice of life, which is currently my new world. So the other thing I want to mention is I may be doing a bit of a shift, kind of a change of direction, if you will, with my channel. I'm going to try and provide the same quality content, perhaps even step it up a little bit better. I'm not going to 100% adhere to and commit to the frequency of videos, and quite simply, I'm going to try and put a little more effort into the editing. Also, I value your time greatly, so if I don't have something very inspirational to say, or if I don't have anything that I feel is worthwhile to put out there, I'm not just going to put up random stuff for the sake of random stuff. So you should see the quality of videos step up, whether it's just from an editing standpoint or me getting a little more wrangled in with my words and ensuring that I've really got something good to say. The frequency will still be decent. It's going to be 3 to 5 videos per week, but it's not a hard, fast rule that I'm going to adhere to. Also, as far as what the content is, I'm going to kind of just branch off in two directions. I'm going to continue doing the reviews when I believe there is some review thing worthy that I am interested in. I will always do those reviews. And also, I'm going to really focus the channel on a lot of world building stuff. Why am I making the changes and bringing this up to you on this video here? It's simple. I have to follow where I'm feeling the most inspired and the most passionate. And at the end of the day, as much as I love an audience and I love to put myself out there and get folks to pay attention, I've got to do what feels good to me. So I'm really into all this world building stuff. I have a lot to offer in that regard. All the way behind the scenes, not literally just making a map, but just talking through the design process, the creative aspects of creating something from nothing, putting something out there. So here is the world map that you should be somewhat familiar with. This is my currently unnamed world, and I've added a bunch of details on here. It looks pretty cluttered. So what I did, if I was to sort of create a new layer very quickly, and I don't need that. I'm going to draw a couple of symbols real big. When you see sort of this tower looking thing, whatever the hell that is, that's one symbol. And then you're going to see a circle. You'll see a square, a little smaller, and then you'll see this icon like this. So this guy right here is a structure. Structure. Okay? It's just a place of significance. It's not a full-blown settlement. It's just something that's important. It can be a castle. It can be a ruin. It can be a tower. So on and so forth. Things like that. The circle is a city. The square is not a village. It's a town. And then this long, big, elaborate thing here is a capital. Okay? So, that being said, let's take a look. We have 4 identified regions. We have the region of Narzad. We have the region of Ankazar. We have the region of Sildron. And then we have the only sort of semblance of like a really well-organized group that is opposed to the bad guys of Narzad. Narzad is the reason why my players, if I decide to run this as a campaign for my group, or if I ever publish this thing, and your players would be in this world as heroes. Now, you can certainly play as, weird templates of PCs with undead attributes and stuff like that and play in the world or in the region of Narzad, but Narzad is just the evil, right? Mordor times 6. Illcraven is sort of the only semblance of like an organized faction of, group of people. That's the empire, if you will. So I don't know a whole lot more. That's why I'm kind of stumbling over my words in that regard, but that's not very important right now. What I want to do is I want to just simply talk you through some world building things. And in doing that, what I can do is I can be a little more focused on providing some good details, but also it'll give me sort of some steps that not only am I showing on video, so hopefully you can take those steps with you into your own world or use this just as inspiration, but the steps also provide me with some accountability and they give me some direction as to where I'm going to go next. Because as I start creating more and more visual stuff and start fleshing out this map, I now need to create some details of what the hell does all that stuff mean, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but by chunking away things, you know what I mean, step by step, I can really get through it efficiently. So here is the example of the capital. There's the icon that I made. So we only have 3 on the map. We have South Landing right here, we have Sildranth, and then we have Ilkraven. Okay, kind of the big orange letters. When you see this sort of off yellow color, they indicate either a city or one of the structures. So like Fort Stag is right here, Fort Gilvad, and then you have Kefrun, Kyra, Koeth, and Kelisk. Okay, you've got those areas. Those are just significant, but they're labeled as such. And then you have cities, which is the circles. This is a map that I sort of shrunk down a little bit because the original map is much more detailed. It's exactly what you see, but it's just of higher quality, higher pixel count and density. So it's really unwieldy to work with. When I move a city or any sort of icon, it takes, I'm not exaggerating, like 5 to 8 seconds of real time to move it. Yes, that could be attributed to my computer, but I have a pretty decent computer. This is like a 3 gig file. So the resolution and the distinction between a square and a circle, I can't make a square and a circle is much more pronounced. Whereas on here, it's going to look one and the same, but just look for this off yellow color. And that means it's something of typically larger, whether it's a structure, as I said, like the forts, or Dagsmoke's Lair, Bomani, Kinvaldar, Sarakis, Animaxiel, Underwood, King's Anvil, so on and so forth. Now, the bulk of all this stuff, which is in white lettering, in white font, and it's lowercase, only the first letter is capitalized, those squares are all towns. And the reason why I did that is there's a really good YouTube video out there where it shows sort of how, whether it was medieval London or, medieval Europe, just the way things really happened. You always had the distance between one place and another was generally something like a 10-mile circle, right? A 10-mile radius. And the reason for that, I don't know how accurate this is, and it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to get this level necessarily of accuracy within this world here, but the reason for that is the farmer that runs out of a certain supply can be up right at the crack of dawn, journey on, not mounted, just journey along the road or along the trail for the bulk of a day, reach another settlement, get the supplies that he needs from that place, and make it back before nightfall, right? Before the bad things come out. And that general idea, what I did is, as I created cities and capitals, so I created Ilkraven, which is the capital city, and then you can see King's Anvil's here. I'm going to change this to red, I think. Okay. King's Anvil is right here. And then you have like a Fort Urslag. You have Eastport, which is a city. I'll get rid of these red dots in a minute. And Ottleton is out here on the island. So you have those, and then here's Ilkraven. Look at the distance. Now here's my scale. This whole thing is 125 miles. I broke it up into 5 little pieces, and I left it as a little scale marker here to indicate that distance right there, so between here and here, is only 25 miles, which is equivalent in the player's handbook so that you can get a measurement of about how far would you travel if you weren't mounted just through normal travel, right? Without pushing for exhaustion, without trying to go slow and use stealth, and also without going at what's called a fast pace, where you're giving yourself negative modifiers to your perception, stuff like that. So normal travel, you're only going to cover about this distance. So if I took that little marker and I kind of indicated, the spacing here is absurd, right? And I wanted to think about within the Ilkraven Empire, the kingdom, which is where you'll notice all these little villages are dotted, whereas obviously it's a lot more sparse in here, right? Indicating that these are not as well-traveled regions. They're going to look a little more to like our version of Iceland than New York City, right? So what I did is I inserted all of these little villages, okay? And the reason for that is I wanted to try and close the gap a little bit so that you can move potentially within the empire, the Ilkraven Empire, almost anywhere within about a full day of travel. Now, yes, I know some of these places are still outside of that 10-mile range, but what I did is I just assumed, or I'm going to indicate in my writing, that between Ilkraven and Thane, there's also, since these are towns, I don't know if I keep saying they're villages, these squares are towns. Between the towns, there's villages and hamlets, and those would fill in the gaps so that you can go from the capital of Ilkraven, stop at some little village or hamlet, stop at another little village or hamlet, stop at another, and then make it to the town of Thane. And then from Thane to Renly, there's probably one little village or hamlet. I'm not, because the map's going to get just absurdly cluttered, going to make all those little villages and hamlets, but I did put the towns, which I feel like adds and gives you the impression when looking at the map that there's a lot going on in this world. Therein lies the problem. I need to create something for every one of those. Let's just take a look at Sildran real quick. Within the region, which is kind of all filled in within this sort of bowl that's formed by the boundaries of the mountains, you have the capital of Sildranth. You have, I'm going to make this a little smaller so I don't have to maybe erase it. You have the city of Animaxiel, Underwood, Renlin's Fork. These are all part of the Sildran region. Not empire necessarily, but Kinvaldar, Bomani. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities. Okay? Now, down here is the Bullybog, a region that is controlled by the Bullywug group of people. They don't have any cities, they just have large towns called East Wugwarren Southwest, and then their main sort of capital, if you will, is called the Bogwall. So even though that's within the sort of overall region, Sildran controls kind of everything outside of the Bullybog. So you'll notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities plus the capital. Now we've got, I'm not going to count them all, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. You get it. There's 40 there. There's probably nearly as many down here, you know, along this whole eastern portion of the map. There's a few down here, you know, there's areas in here. Now, Narzad, which is the horrible dark place on my world where nobody wants to be, and it's the evil, it's the Mordor, I don't have any of them labeled. This is not, you know, unfinished, where I'm supposed to have labels. There is a city called Bonewick, which is where, like, the main general of the evil forces is, whether he's some revenant vampire, I don't know what he is, a lich, demon, whatever the hell he is. And then they just have all these little encampments everywhere. They're just all over the place, which is all these things. But the point is, I now have to populate all these things and indicate something within my world book. And that's going to be just too unwieldy. You very rarely will see, yes, if it's Tolkien or something like that, you're going to see that level. But generally, you're not going to see that much detail on that many places. Because the other thing to really think about is, for your player's perspective, getting it to the table, does it even matter that you have that many places? Are they really going to go there? You know, do I want to create 110 pages of content on everything here if your potential world might only occur within this? Well, I have to kind of create something, because the other perspective group of DM and players might actually run through here. So they need to know, why the hell would I need to leave the capital of Ilkraven and make my way to Thane and Glimmer and Pith Sava and Shib's Watch and all this stuff? So to wrangle that in, what I'm going to do very simply is, for all of the towns, which are all the squares, the bulk of what you see on the map, I have another little file open, I think. I'm going to do this very simply. I'm going to lay it out in my little, you know, InDesign when it's actual something that I'm going to use. And I'm going to have the name Shib's Watch, the name of each village. And under it, there's going to be 2 sections, if you will, 2 charts. That's it. You have an NPC chart, and then you have a rumors chart. The NPCs are what sort of interesting people might be there. And I'm going to do this for every one of those squares, every one of those villages. I just counted in the region of Sildran, there's, 40 places? For just Sildran alone, you'll see the big heading. I always talk about it in my reviews about Design 101 and making everything stand out well so you know where you're at and where you're navigating through. You'll see Sildran. Of course, I'll talk about it. I'll show what the faction symbols look like and who's there, what's the population of the region, what is it predominantly made of, what races, so on and so forth, right? All the good bits, which I'll go over in just a little bit. But then beneath that, you'll see, the capital, Sildranth. You'll see information on the city. And the capital and the cities themselves, those, what are they again? Animaxiel, Underwood, Escalith, Renlin's Fork, Sildranth, and Kinvaldar and Sarrakis, all those, they may each have their own page or two of just a bunch of interesting bits, right? But each of these little these towns, these squares, are going to have this chart. Okay? These two charts. And you can simply just roll a d4 to find an interesting NPC there. And I kept it all one sentence so it kind of lays out efficiently. In one random town, you might find Valen. He's a commoner, a male human. 3 years ago, he lost his daughter during a catastrophic storm. If you roll a 2, Shirani. She's a female human, commoner. MM means the same commoner stat block in the monster manual. Shirani has the spellcasting feature. That might be interesting. Remember, I'm doing this for all 40 or however many towns there are. So you're going to find enough interesting bits that all I'm really trying to do here is just provide gameplay so that it's not just something on the map that looks cool, but I also don't have to overwhelm myself with how much... I'm not going to create a page on every one of these. I mean, look how many you can count. I can't create... That's 200 pages just on villages alone. That's too much world detail, right? Because how much of that is really going to matter at the table? And one thing I've seen when I've read, what do people really like with world building is they just love tables. So that you can roll on this and very quickly and efficiently find something that matters to the group. And then there's the other table that each village is going to have is a rumor table. If you roll a 1, the dwarf, Doval, he's up here, one of the NPCs, is the cousin of Tin Whisk's leader, Lord Garen Felstad. 2 years ago, the town was abandoned for 3 weeks because of a vampire coven roaming in the region. A door in the cellar of the Ham and Raven Tavern leads to an old, inoperable wizard's portal. And then if you roll a 4, don't drink anything offered from old Hamish. Man's cursed he is, he'll give it to you. So it's just something that the DM can kind of run with for that place. Where I mentioned that Doval is the cousin of Tin Whisk's leader, the regions will have... Here's Tin Whisk right here. The regions will tie in. You may see something in the rumors or the 1d4 NPCs that, this NPC was once from Whittlefin, and he is now blah, blah, blah. So, they're going to have some relation. They might. They're not just kind of random in like a little vacuum, a little pocket. They will kind of have rumors and various things that might fit with the overall theme of the Sildran region and so on. But that's it. Each of those towns is just going to have that. Don't look at that yet. Don't look at that. Don't look at that. Is going to have this. So that's it. I just now need to create 2 1d4 tables for every one of my towns. It's now going to give you good bits to take to your table for DMs, but I now am not as overwhelmed because I can just kind of create 3 or 4 of these per day. And over a course of 3-4 weeks, I've got 40-50 of them. And I know I can manage it now. I don't have to erase all these things on the map, and they have a reason for being there. Okay? Final bits of the video, let's get into world building sort of 101. So, location design. Okay, here are the things that I think through, and these are the things that I'm going to think through for each of the places, not the towns, but the big places, right? The capitals, the cities, the structures, the important stuff. The things that are indicated on the map as important. Now, I may do this in prep time, but that's for each individual DM. I may do this for those towns as well, the ones that just have the charts. The charts are going to be printed in the book that all, the random person that I may never meet is going to have a copy of that book. But for myself, if my PCs are going to that town, and this can even be done for a hamlet. If it's someplace that's important that the PCs are going to spend a few nights at, and it's going to soak up some gameplay time, I'll run through this process. And this is just my process that I'm going to go through to make all my places more interesting, but most importantly, kind of, revealing my hand to you. The red one down at the bottom in bold is the most important because these are the sort of things that I want to think through for how does it apply at the table. No matter what you come up with, you've got to come up with good bits that can actually get you through a game session, and that's what I talk about all the time. So, location design. First thing you want to think about is whenever the group gets to a place, whether it's a tree, a druid grove, or Waterdeep, right? A massive city. The senses. the very first thing I think about is what WTF? What the hell is that? Right? What did I just see? In a world where it's supposed to be very, very low magic, when they walk down the main street and they notice that all of the temples are floating, that's a big, what is your WTF moment? Like, what the hell did I just see? Also with the senses. So what do they smell, right? If it's a place that's renowned for halflings and bakers and whatnot, they're going to remember the smell of fresh bread and the pie. And also you can kind of really tie in these senses and make a place more appealing or more repulsive, depending on what the PCs have been through. If this is a very Barovia dark, kind of cloudy place where there's no sun, and they've just spent 3 sessions, what is that, 8-hour session, let's say, 5-hour session, 15 to 30 hours of real life time in the Underdark, they might be immediately put off by this dark, beaten up, rainy, I call it cyberpunk city, right? They might want something a little more friendly, a little more bubbly. So the senses can do a lot for the next 2 bullet points, which is, what about this place would the PCs want to come back for? Notice I'm tying it into the PCs. Don't start rambling off a bunch of things about your cool idea on what this place is. Relate it to the PCs. What might they want to come back for? And what would make them never want to visit this place again? Okay? Also, when you get into a location, how do the people live? What is the general lifestyle expenses as per the player's handbook? Aristocratic, wealthy, poor, squalid, whatever. Also, what's the ratio? How many do they see that are sort of poor, sick, and disheveled and just sort of looking homeless versus palatial and blingy? How many people are flaunting and overtly showing silk robes and large jewels and rings and whatnot, right? Because that's going to inform more things. There may now be thieves guilds within the place because there's a lot of valuable stuff to steal. But just how do the people live? Also, how do they survive, right? From just a very survival one-on-one thing, their imports and exports. What do they bring in? What do they bring out? Or what do they export? What are the things that they need that maybe if they're in the desert, one of those desert places, they're probably not going to have access to fish, but so on and so forth, right? So how do the people there live? What do the people fear? Okay, the general public. Are there any imminent threats? Because that might inform you as to why there's so many damn militia on the street, why they're so well armed, why they're wearing, the blacksmiths are all taxed to no end because they are having to create so much metal armor. Is there a dragon within 5 miles? Is there an undead, what I mean? Is it the wall in Game of Thrones, right? Their threat is very different than King's Landing, let's say. What are the perceived threats? Okay, this is just the general population. Yeah, you can always talk to that one informant, that one specific guild leader, and the Forgotten Realms retired adventurer, crazy level 18 NPC. But no, I'm talking about the average kid, boy, people on the street. Why do they shutter their windows when you walk past? What is it about the PCs that they feel they're tied into that perceived threat? They believe everyone that shows any sort of magic wizardry, so the guy floating on Tensor's floating disc or has a familiar walking through town, that dude's a witch. They perceive any magic as witchcraft, right? These things will inform how your PCs are reacted to. And likewise, they start going back to what would the PCs want to come back for and what would make them never want to visit again. They just didn't feel welcome there and so on. Also, what's the culture and superstition of the place? That is where you can kind of really start tying into your background, right? To all the details you put together about why the place is what they are. Something happened every 10 years over and over again, this demonic invasion. That's why they're so damn superstitious about fire or whatever, right? So what's that? Going into culture and superstition, there's a lot of good bits here. This is a big one. How much do their superstitions impede their sense of adventure? Okay, now you'll notice there's a lot of these bullet points that sort of tie in and interweave and go back to, there's no particular order here. It's just the things I'll typically run through. I want to at least think through these. I may not actually create content, meaning this may not make it into some sort of written document, but I at least want to think through every one of these bullet points. And by doing that, I know that I've covered all bases and I've created not just a good living, breathing place, which you fill up enough of those living, breathing, relatable world, locations, that creates a compelling world, right? That's all it is. It's just little things building upon one another that create the entirety of a place that makes it feel Tolkien-esque. But you'll notice that there's a very heavy, I'm leaning very heavily towards, does it matter at the table? right? These are things that my PCs want to observe, and how do they react to that? And you'll see when we get into some of these other ones. So, as I said, how much do their superstitions impede their sense of adventure? That may be a certain NPC's reluctance to give you any information. They just don't give a damn because they believe that fire's bad. I don't care enough to investigate further. I'm not going to help you with this. I just, you know what I mean? So that's a big part. Also, what are their ideas on the main groups in the monster manual? What is the general perception of, what do they think about dragons? Are dragons godlike, or are dragons fictional? You know, are they not real? You know what I mean? How do they feel about undead? Do they feel like necromancy is just this horrible, terrible thing? Or do they feel like they all want a chance to see their loved ones again, but they don't understand the difference between that undead is no longer, you know, it's a husk of whatever. What are their perceptions? And just kind of flip through the monster manual, look through the different groups. Maybe you don't have to go into aberrations and things that are a little more esoteric and whatnot, but they're definitely the commons. What are their perceptions on giants versus orcs and ogres? Do they know the difference between an Etten and an ogre and so on? So create kind of that concept, and that will help inform how the people think and how they live and breathe. What's their version of good and evil? What to them is good and what's bad? You know, is all murder evil? Or is it, if that person kidnapped your child, can you blow up his house and everyone that lives in it? You know what I mean? Just different levels, because that might inform the paladin of certain things. That might kind of, before the PCs ever investigate further into the city or the town or whatever it may be, that might tell them what sort of faiths and religions are here. Okay? Now, the other thing with that is, these don't have to be things that are the initial impressions that this is the first time they've gotten, the PCs have arrived there. Yes, you want to have a little bit of that, which is where the senses come in. Like, what's the first things they see, like I said. But these are also the things you want to start running through, that as the PCs have lived it, you know, maybe they've been in this place for 9 months, and here's all the different things they've learned over time. Not everyone needs to be that forthcoming with all this information. It could have taken a year before they finally learned that all elders in the village are magic users. You know what I mean? Whatever it might be. So placidity versus ambition. Kind of, this is where, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What's the general disposition, or what's their general take on comfort versus discomfort? Are they just the Shire in a way? Are they just happy where they are? I'm content. You know, I'm good. I'm at peace. I don't need to look for any more. You know, because that might change how your PCs interact with the NPCs, and back, and you know, vice versa, how the NPCs interact, of whether they're ambitious. They don't give a damn that there's something possible treasure in the dungeon to the south. They're happy where they are. Don't open those doors and nothing's going to bother us. You know what I mean? So what is the general public's perception on that? What's the government and control within your world? What's the general sense of freedom? Can you stand on your soapbox, if you will, and just, I hate the leader, I want to murder all of the government, you know, whatever? Can you do that without just outright getting shot in the face and or arrested? You know what I mean? How democratic is everything, you know? And you can, of course, tie things into how it is in the real world and whatnot, but is it a tyrannical leader? You know what I mean? Is it something where, kind of leading into the next few ones, who do the people believe is in charge? Is there some sort of a figurehead? You know, kind of like they say, like the president of a country, but then you have the emperor. You know what I mean? Is it the religion that's really in charge? Is it kind of like from Ravnica, my own campaign that I'm running, where the Orzhov seem to be behind a lot of things? You know, they're the religion, they're the finance, they're the money. Are they really in charge? Is there some sort of a thieves guild in charge? And if different, who really is in charge versus who the people think is in charge? That can kind of show you, point you in the direction, especially if the PCs are very heroic or they're higher level. They're going to be eventually dealing with folk on a longer term basis than just the beggars and the people that are sort of living homeless in the streets. They're going to be talking to the nobility and the who's who of the city. Also, what's the general social level of, like, rising through the ranks? Can the guy at the lowly, you know, can the lowly blacksmith ever become the general of the armies? Or do you have to be born noble? Do you need certain blood? Does the council or the leadership of the city actually have to assign and appoint someone to reach a certain status? Or can you move up in the city? Can you move up in the ranks? Okay. Here's the big ones where we notice, as we get down to the bottom, although I said there's no particular order, these are ones that really start to get to the nuts and bolts of what happens at the game, at the table, and how it applies to your character, so it doesn't get too world building-ish, like you're writing a novel. We're not just talking through things, okay? We're actually playing a game here. What's the public perception of the stuff on the characters, on your character sheets? You have magic users, warlocks, wizards, sorcerers. How does the public perceive magic? Do they know the difference between arcane and divine? Do they believe all wizards are witches? Witchcraft. Are warlocks horrible things that need to be killed on sight? Are wizards the only true mages? So on and so forth. How do they perceive weapons? That guy, that barbarian that's rolling in with the great axe, is that a sign of hostility? So on and so forth. How do they perceive violence, right? The character in your group that's murder hobo versus the pacifist paladin. How do they perceive those two any differently? What's their take on religion? Your cleric walks in with various vestments. Is that religion even present in this region? What's their take on, again, divine versus arcane? Do they know the difference? Do they believe that they're both the same thing? Do they believe that arcane is the work of the devil and then divine is the work of not a god, but the work of the lake and the water nearby because that's what provides them with all the life and sustenance they need and so on? So think about the things on your character sheets and how would the public, the general group perceive that stuff. And that can always go back to what do they perceive as good and evil, right? Do they believe any caster is evil and any druid is good because they're a elven nature going folk of group of people. And then the last one, the big boy, is story and adventure. Why are you bringing your group here? What are they going to do that's important to get through some game time? Who has a problem, or what is the problem that the PCs could and would want to solve? Always ask that question. When you bring them to any location, yes, we're going through the bullet points of Location Design 101. First and foremost, yes, for my sake, as a world builder, and if you're making your own world and you want to put it out there as a campaign setting, you need to go through these things and create some written stuff here that your DM can chew on. But once you're at the table and you're going to run something, is there a problem that the PCs actually can deal with? Because if they can't, are you just setting them up for TPK? Is that your goal? And if they could deal with it, do they even want to? Is their quest log full, so to speak? And is this just something that's so trivial compared to the big giant quest world-ending story that's going on and that you've told your players about? Does it highlight their character choices? The things that, again, it boils down to the character sheet. When your characters have all these builds on range combat and all this other stuff, make sure that you create some cool bits and some cool story where they have a problem that can only be dealt. There's giants, but they can't let the giants get close to the city. They need help with people that can maybe shoot at the giants from far away. How convenient that 4 of the 5 group, members in your party on their character sheet, which you should know about as the DM, have all these sharpshooter feats and various things that deal on range combat. It now makes them feel valuable to the place, okay? Does it fill up actual gameplay time? Is it something you can bring to the table that's going to fill up some time? And that ties into the next one. Does this situation, the story and the adventure of this place, this whole location, doesn't matter if it's the size of Waterdeep or if it's a hamlet with 4 buildings, does this place require die rolls? Otherwise, you can gloss over it, give them some cool description to add a good flavor and ambiance to your world. But if there's no die rolls involved, then notice this doesn't have to be initiative, timing, and combat. If there's no die rolls, there's nothing to have to roll an investigation for. There's no persuasion, perception, nothing else. Gloss over it and move on. But does it require a die roll? Is it something that your players might actually be able to interact with? And if so, can that chunk away at a few hours of gameplay time? Can it lead into some sort of an encounter? And again, maybe a social encounter, right? Maybe a skill challenge, something like that. Something where the result is unknown and it's left up to the dice and or a combination of role play, the DM talking through NPCs with the players and how they react to one another. Okay? That's a lot to chew on, I know, but if you look at my map once again, there's a lot for me to have to chew on. But I think by taking things through bullet points, I'm going to pull this thing, I'm going to kind of ramble with this last little bit. It's beautiful. There's a fellow I follow called Runehammer. He's brilliant. He's brilliant. He said this once. Think in bullet points and step back and prep your ammo. Don't prep the shootouts. I'll let you interpret those as you see fit. That's all I have for you folks. Thanks for watching this world building video. Stay tuned for more. As I said, reviews and world building goodness. Take care.